What if the greatest threat is not at the gates, but already lurking within? In the past 48 hours, Western Ukraine has endured an onslaught of coordinated high-tech attacks. Fuel depots, power stations, and critical energy hubs were struck with chilling accuracy, crippling vital infrastructure and military logistics. Vast fuel reserves, lifelines for frontline units, were set ablaze. Power stations, including one crucially linked to Europe's energy grid, fell silent. The message is clear. The notion of a safe rear has collapsed. No city, no supply line, and no distance provides true security anymore. Modern warfare has shattered the old distinctions between front and rear. Precision weapons can reach across hundreds of kilometers, turning the entire depth of a country into a battlefield. Every disruption behind the lines now surges forward, threatening not just supplies, but the very survival and fighting spirit of an army. To grasp the gravity, imagine a single drone attack in the dead of night. Sirens wail, but before anyone can react, a missile pierces the darkness, striking a fuel depot. In minutes, flames engulf reservoirs holding tens of thousands of liters of diesel. These are not just numbers on a spreadsheet. Each destroyed tank means a convoy stranded, a battalion immobilized, and perhaps a town lost the next day. Yet a deeper question gnaws beneath the surface. Is enemy firepower our only adversary? Or do corruption, incompetence, and eroding trust pose an even graver danger from within? If these internal weaknesses linger, even the most brilliant victories may be undone by rot at the core. To understand how external shocks are laying bare a deeper crisis, we must step back and examine the forces reshaping this war from the inside out. Recent events have not only exposed infrastructure vulnerabilities, but have also stripped away illusions about the military's inner stability. Let us dig into how these shocks are forcing a reckoning within the Russian system. Let's set aside the slogans and confront the facts on the ground. Just reality, stripped of sentiment. On the night of November 26th, Western Ukraine suffered one of the most methodical and complex assaults in years. Precision-guided munitions targeted fuel depots and vital power nodes, inflicting colossal material losses. Giant tanks, holding thousands of tons of diesel, erupted into fireballs visible for miles, devastating military logistics and lighting up the horizon. The infernos reached beyond their intended marks, a warning that in today's wars, nowhere is truly safe. Distance is no longer a shield. In Ternopil, for example, at least 9 separate strikes were confirmed by local monitors. Witnesses described shockwaves so powerful that apartment blocks kilometers away had their upper floors shattered. The blast was so intense that windows shattered and doors were ripped off their hinges, leaving families scrambling for safety in the freezing night. These attacks were anything but accidental. The offensive focused on the energy grid, especially power stations tethered to Europe, using advanced weaponry to knock critical sites offline. The Burstin energy hub, a linchpin connecting Ukraine's grid with Hungary, Slovakia, and Romania, was left crippled. As crews race against time, the reliability of energy flows across borders is in doubt, sending a cold message to Kiev and its European allies. Their shared energy future is precarious. Consider what happened at the Burstin thermal power station. Using a combination of cruise missiles and attack drones, assailants overwhelmed local defenses. This wasn't just a blow to Ukraine, but a strategic signal to Bratislava, Budapest, and Bucharest that their power supplies could be jeopardized at any moment. With one strike, the fragile bridge linking Ukrainian and European energy grids began to crumble. The risk of blackouts and cascading failures now looms not just over Ukraine, but over parts of Central Europe as well. Military repair installations were also hit. Workshops vital for restoring tanks and armored vehicles were obliterated, reducing machines awaiting battle to heaps of wreckage in mere moments. Losses run into the tens of millions of dollars, but the greater cost is operational. With these repair lines shattered, Ukraine's capacity to return armor to the front collapses. Frontline troops now wait for reinforcements that may never come. Imagine a tank brigade waiting for its repaired vehicles, only to learn the factory is now a smoldering ruin. Spare parts, engines, and skilled hands are gone overnight. These setbacks echo historical precedents. In World War II, German panzer divisions stalled when their supply chains were severed, leading to defeats not by enemy fire, but by logistical collapse. Simultaneously, in the east, Russian advances are tightening the noose. Key towns are nearly encircled, with Ukrainian supply lines strangled or under constant fire. In places like Pokrovsk, bastions once considered secure are cut off, making evacuation and resupply a dangerous gamble. In Pokrovsk, a town once touted as an impregnable fortress, the situation has flipped. Russian forces, employing a blend of artillery barrages and drone reconnaissance, have turned once safe corridors into shooting galleries. Medics attempting to evacuate the wounded now face ambushes and targeted strikes, reminiscent of the infamous sieges of Grozny or Sarajevo, where the rear became just as perilous as the front. The destruction is immense, but the deeper damage lies in the disruption to military effectiveness and the strain this puts on fragile alliances. Each strike chips away not just at hardware, but at the confidence of troops and the faith of international partners. Consider the psychological toll. Soldiers huddling in trenches, knowing their next shipment of ammunition may never arrive. Allies in distant capitals watch nervously, questioning whether their investments, billions of euros in aid, are secure or if they are pouring resources into a sinking vessel. The sense of unity, so vital in wartime, begins to fracture under the strain. Yet these battlefield shocks are only part of the story. Behind the front lines, the Russian military faces its own internal war, a struggle against corruption and inefficiency that could prove as decisive as any missile strike. What does it mean to win if the very system meant to protect you is crumbling from within? This is the question that lingers over every army where internal decay threatens to unravel battlefield triumphs. In today's wars, the deadliest threat may not be enemy fire, but the slow, invisible poison of corruption, bureaucracy, and criminality eroding the ranks from the inside. While headlines fixate on the front lines, most soldiers face a darker reality day after day. When trucks remain idle, ammunition runs out, or help never comes, the real cause is often not enemy action, but the sabotage of mismanagement and greed. Supplies disappear, spare parts are nothing but promises, and support evaporates, because someone is siphoning resources or simply refusing to act. For a stark example, look to the case uncovered in 2023, when a procurement officer was caught diverting entire shipments of body armor for personal sale. Soldiers arrived at the front with substandard gear, or none at all, because someone in the rear was banking on their suffering. The result? Avoidable casualties and a collapse of morale. Scandals have pulled back the curtain on a chilling pattern. Some commanders run their units like private kingdoms, embezzling funds, demanding bribes for food or leave, or even running protection rackets among their own men. In notorious cases, entire battalions are led by ex-convicts who enforce order through fear and violence, not through respect or competence. Tales abound of murder, beatings, and the sudden vanishing of principled officers who dared to speak out. This is not new in military history. The Roman Empire's legions, once famed for discipline, decayed when corruption among tribunes and quartermasters became rampant. Emperors like Commodus watched their armies falter, not from enemy brilliance, but because pay was stolen, rations adulterated, and loyalty bought and sold. Rome's enemies sharpened their swords, but it was the empire's own rot that opened the gates. Layered atop this is a suffocating bureaucracy, where paperwork and posturing count for more than tangible results. Decision-making stalls as forms pile up, and soldiers at the front feel abandoned by a system more focused on self-preservation than winning. The divide grows wider each day, as reality on the ground slips further from the glossy reports sent up the chain of command. A modern parallel can be drawn from the Soviet-Afghan War. There, field commanders often had to falsify logs to meet arbitrary quotas, while real needs went unaddressed. Helicopters sat idle for want of a $2 part, even as generals reported 100% combat readiness. The result? Disillusionment, desertion, and ultimately, defeat. The danger here is not just a failed operation or a lost battle. If this internal rot is ignored, it can spark a total collapse of morale, of discipline, even of the army's very legitimacy. No arsenal, no matter how advanced, can save a force rotting from within. And when the system devours its own, everyone pays the price. The Ukrainian conflict has thrown these issues into sharp relief, exposing hidden fractures and forcing a reckoning inside Russian military ranks. As the struggle intensifies, the question remains: can the system reform itself before it breaks entirely? Will long-promised change finally break the cycle, or is it merely a facade concealing deeper rot? As headlines obsess over explosions and shifting front lines, a quieter but crucial contest unfolds inside the Russian military itself. The newly appointed defense minister has ignited upheaval by launching a relentless purge, targeting corruption that once seemed untouchable. For the first time in many years, interagency commissions are empowered to bypass layers of resistant bureaucracy. Their mission is direct: enforce transparency, demand accountability, and dismantle the hidden webs that have sapped the army's strength. No longer do investigations stop at the lower ranks. Now, even generals and top procurement officials are under the microscope. The first results are a volatile blend of hope and suspicion. High-profile arrests and publicized trials dominate the news, but a question hangs in the air. Will this campaign endure, or will it fade after a handful of scapegoats are paraded before the cameras? Whispers ripple through the officer corps. Some claim the old guard is only being replaced with new faces destined to repeat old patterns, while others sense a rare fear gripping the hierarchy's core. The fate of reform is tightly bound to the spirit and unity of the armed forces. Soldiers in the trenches must trust that promotions are earned, supplies are not siphoned away, and justice is more than just a slogan. Without this faith, even the most sophisticated weapons cannot fill the void left by a corroded institution. The stakes could not be higher. If these reforms falter, the military risks becoming a shell, impressive on parade, but fragile and ineffective when tested. Each delay and every half-hearted measure feeds cynicism, draining the will to fight and threatening not only battlefield performance, but also the nation's long-term security and social fabric. Historical parallels abound. When the United States military undertook its post-Vietnam reforms, it did so by rooting out incompetent leadership, instituting rigorous training, and demanding transparent procurement. The transformation was hard-won, requiring years, not months. But the result was a force capable of the swift, decisive campaigns of the 1990s. In contrast, when reform is shallow, as in late Tsarist Russia, defeat can come swiftly and unexpectedly, as during the First World War. Yet what does real reform look like with war raging? Can deeply rooted habits be uprooted while the guns are still firing? As cracks widen within the system, the consequences ripple out to the front lines and far beyond. What happens next will determine not just the fate of the military, but the future of the nation itself. So, what practical steps can be taken right now, even in the midst of conflict? First, a clear chain of accountability must be established. Every transaction, from bootlaces to battle tanks, must be tracked in real time and made subject to independent audit. Digital inventories and blockchain technology, already piloted in some NATO armies, can dramatically reduce theft and misreporting. Second, whistleblower protections must be robust and real. Soldiers and officers who report wrongdoing need not fear retribution. Anonymous hotlines, independent ombudsmen, and strict penalties for retaliation are essential. Cases like the exposure of procurement fraud in South Korea's military, where protected informants triggered sweeping reforms, offer a roadmap. Third, leadership selection must prioritize merit and integrity above all else. Promotions based on nepotism or bribes must be rooted out. A transparent, competitive process for selecting commanders can restore faith, as proven in the reforms of the Israeli Defense Forces after the Yom Kippur War. Fourth, public oversight is crucial. Civil society organizations, investigative journalists, and citizen committees must be empowered to scrutinize military spending and conduct. The example of Scandinavian countries, where military budgets are subject to open parliamentary review, demonstrates that transparency strengthens, rather than weakens, defense. Victory is forged not only on the battlefield, but also deep within the ranks. Recent events have laid bare how vulnerable a nation becomes when its backbone is weakened from within. The headlines may show drones and missiles, but history always reveals armies crumble when their core rots. The first step is restoring honor and lawful order among officers. This is not mere ritual. It is the bedrock of trust and morale. When commanders act with integrity and laws are more than words, soldiers find real purpose. They follow leaders who inspire, not those who intimidate or enrich themselves. Yet this challenge runs deeper than ceremonies or codes. It demands a generational shift. New leaders must be chosen for courage and selflessness, not for connections or a willingness to look the other way. Old habits, corruption, favoritism, self-dealing, are threats greater than any enemy weapon. In times of true danger, the luxury of complacency is fatal. No amount of modern technology, no drone swarm, no smart system can replace honest leadership. The bond between command and the front lines must be built on mutual respect and shared risk. Words and symbols mean nothing if leaders betray their own. Society must not be a bystander. Real accountability is public. Incompetence and corruption must be punished openly, not buried in darkness. When citizens demand justice, leaders must serve, not exploit. Only then can the wounds begin to heal. Failure to reform now risks everything: the nation's security, the dignity of its people, even its survival. To ignore these flaws is to invite defeat, not just in war, but in the trust and hope that bind a country together. But if the demand for change is relentless, real, and met with action, then lasting progress is within reach. The contest on the front lines is visible to all, but the battle for the system's soul is quieter and just as decisive. The next phase reveals how these internal struggles shape everything that follows. History is watching now, as never before. The gravest test facing a nation is not only what it overcomes on the battlefield, but what it forges, quietly, stubbornly, within its own walls. Tonight, while the world tracks the arc of missiles and redraws front lines in western Ukraine, a deeper, invisible conflict rages far from any map: the struggle for the soul of the state. Precision strikes may shatter fuel depots, disrupt power, and cut off cities, but the most decisive battles are fought in the shadows, against corruption, inertia, and the old habits that erode strength from within. On the surface, headlines celebrate victories: convoys advancing, supply lines severed, strongholds falling. Yet these gains, no matter how dramatic, cannot guarantee safety or honor if decay persists behind the curtain. Modern war teaches a brutal truth: a nation's power is measured not just by the reach of its weapons, but by the integrity of its institutions and the unity of its people. Everything is at stake: the effectiveness of defense, the morale and lives of soldiers, and the nation's place in the world. None of it is secure without the courage to reform, honestly and relentlessly. Empty words and shallow changes are no longer enough. Only by rooting out the old sickness and demanding real transformation can lasting security and unity be built. This is not a test for soldiers alone. It calls every citizen to vigilance, to honesty, to a refusal of complacency. History will not remember the slogans. It will remember what was truly built in this hour of trial. The question is no longer what lines are drawn on a map, but whether a nation can turn its hardest trials into the bedrock of something stronger. Concrete examples from other nations show the way forward. After the Falklands War, Britain's Ministry of Defense undertook a comprehensive review, exposing flaws in logistics and command. Open hearings and public debate led to sweeping changes and renewed public trust. In contrast, when reform is delayed, as in pre-revolutionary France, stagnation festers until a tipping point is reached, often with catastrophic results. The lesson is clear: every crisis is also an opportunity. If Ukraine, Russia, or any nation at war can seize this moment, by confronting its flaws, protecting its reformers, and demanding real accountability, then the cycle of decay can be broken. Otherwise, history's verdict will be harsh and inescapable. As the fires in the West smolder and the eastern front lines shift, the world waits. The outcome will not be decided solely by missiles or tanks, but by the courage to look within, to act with integrity, and to build the kind of future that will endure long after the last shot is fired.